Lamentations 2:14. Your prophets have seen for you false and deceptive visions. They have not exposed your iniquity to restore your fortunes, but have seen for you oracles that are false and misleading. Proverbs 22:16. One who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty. And Deuteronomy 27:17. Cursed be anyone who moves his neighbor's boundary mark or landmark. And all the people shall say, Amen. I don't know how that's going to fit into our discussion, but I felt like it would. So, welcome to Christ in Capital, everybody. This is a show that wants to encourage you to love God, love neighbor, and build something. I'm the host, Dustin Johnson. We have an awesome episode for you today. It may cause you a little bit of anxiety, maybe some post-traumatic stress. Some of you may have to have a mental health checkup after this because we're going to be talking about student loans. Yeah, it's a tough subject, a lot going on in the news related to this right now, but who better to have on to talk about student loans than a college professor himself? Nathan, how are you doing?
I am doing well, and I'm glad that I'm on here to help talk about this because New College Franklin, where I work, we actually don't accept federal student loans. One of the reasons for that is we want to make sure that we have total freedom to teach what we want. But also, we think that federal student loans, there's a little bit of benefit, but there's a lot more negative that comes along with it, which we'll talk about today.
Yep. And I think even in the realm of Christian colleges, there's not a lot that don't accept. Like a lot of them do accept federal aid. And when you take the king's coin, you become the king's man. Is that? Yeah, so I'm excited. Before we jump into the discussion, everyone, I want you to go over to Christ in Capital, all the different social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, all the different podcasts. Subscribe, go to YouTube and click the notification bell so that you get notified anytime we release an episode or any other content. It really helps us climb the ladder when you guys engage. So yeah, got a lot going on here. Also, I guess kind of the spinoff project that we have, Good Fight Outfitters, is going strong right now. We've got a whole bunch of new products that we're about to release. Just released a couple new ones, the Worship is Warfare line, which I think is really cool. A lot of people have been super interested in it. And well, I've got one of the items on here. I keep doing that every time we have an episode. I always show off one of the products. So you got your Enmity t-shirt. Hold on, I'll turn around. So.
Ooh.
See it, Nathan, or I can't turn.
Yeah, no, I can see it. Yeah.
You got the seed of the serpent, seed of the woman imagery going on.
Great.
Yeah. So go check it out. It's a lot of fun, learning a lot about how to run a brand business. Yeah. So yeah, go help us out. Go check it out. All right. Student loans. Nathan, there's talk in the news about forgiveness of $10,000 of student loans for everyone. Some of the kind of key hallmarks, I'll just throw this out. $10,000 per student. It would roughly affect 16 million borrowers. It would affect those who make less than 150,000 who file individually, and who make less than 300,000 filing married joint, right? And doing some rough statistics, right? Just take this at the highest level possible. 43.4 million students in the United States that have student loans, right? Or students, people who have student loans. $10,000 times $10,000 divided by 144.3 million taxpayers is about $3,000 per taxpayer. And I had another source that I did this statistic or this calculation based on their statistics. And it came out to be about the same thing. So two different sources, about the same amount. So yeah, interesting little calculation there. What are your thoughts? I mean, have you been keeping up with that whole idea about Biden forgiving student loans?
I hadn't been following it very much. I think there's been talk about student loan forgiveness for years and years and years, but I'm surprised that they're actually really nearing this, that this might actually be a serious thing that they're doing. And of course, for a bit, they've been inching closer to this, right? So,
and pushing it off.
Right. Yeah. But like government workers are able to get their loans forgiven, firefighters, things like that. So they've already kind of had categories of people who can, and now I think they're just kind of expanding it more and more and more.
Yeah.
But it does open up all of these important economic questions that we're going to be asking, and everyone should be asking.
Yeah. I think there was also some people who were in graduates of Corinthian colleges. Have you heard about that? There was a lawsuit against a certain college or a certain brand of colleges under the Corinthian name. They were found to be misleading or falsely advertising their job prospects after graduated and intentionally misrepresenting. And so like I don't know if it was like all of their student loans were given, forgiven, or if it was just part of it, but that was another big one. So $1.6 trillion of student debt for the United States. That's more than 187 countries.
Yeah, more than the GDP of 187 countries. Only 14 countries have a higher GDP than our student loan debt.
That's crazy. We'll get into why I think we're in this predicament. But Nathan, a couple weeks ago, you put a post on Facebook where you had these like random statistics, not random. It was just kind of a couple statistics about student loans. And then you sent me a complete list of a whole bunch of statistics, and they are really eye-opening. They're crazy. What were you trying to do? What are you doing with this?
I think so I have a couple of goals. And so one is I want people to start to think less about just how student loans affect them personally, whether, the question of should I personally take out student loans, and more think about the effect of these things on our entire nation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's one thing to calculate, and this is a fair calculation to go, okay, I want to go to this school, means I'm going to have to take out $50,000 of student loans, but, I've done the math and it's going to work out for my benefit in the long term. So I'm going to do it. Now, we can get into the statistics of how often it doesn't actually work out well in the long term. Yeah. But that's one calculation. But there's another calculation, which is, am I taking advantage of something that's just intrinsically or at least practically bad for the nation as a whole? And so when we start to get into some of these statistics about how this is affecting our economy, how this is affecting our workers, how it's affecting millions and millions and millions of people, that's eye-opening. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we don't talk about enough. And when you start to really look at the numbers, it becomes staggering. Now, of course, you can take that conversation and I think gear it toward another just kind of helpful, larger economic theory conversation about why debt in general is a bad idea and why we really need to get away from what I call debt-based economics. Into a more realistic living in the world, how God has actually designed the world to operate economics. And we can, this kind of sets us up, not just personally in this podcast, but this sets people up to start having those larger conversations as well.
Yeah.
But we need to really look at this, and we need to think in terms of when you want to say forgive student loan debt, it's the question that we ask all the time: who's going to pay for it? Yeah. And what does that actually look like? And
to bring it back to your point, to kind of think about student loans and what we're doing here in the interpersonal. I think so. The Bible doesn't talk a lot about nations, the economics of big nations, right? It always brings it down to the personal, like your interpersonal relationships with your neighbor or with people in your society, that sort of thing. But really, all of economics should be able to be boiled down into those first instances, because all macroeconomics is just kind of the blown up version of those, right? Those first instances, the ground level kind of stuff. And so reassessing and kind of re-gauging our minds to think about what we're doing with this whole student loan thing, in terms of what it does to our nation, to what it does to our neighbors, right? That sort of thing. That's a lot harder for society today because we're so like atomized, individualized, like, how am I going to get by? How am I going to, how's it going to work out for me, sort of thing. And the consequences, or the consequences of the actions that I'm taking now related to student loans, those consequences are way out there. They're like way off in the distance, right? They're not here close to me. I don't see that like immediately. I don't see those consequences. So, but we seriously do need to think about that. And I think when we look at these statistics, you're gonna start reassessing that. So, what are some of the ones that stuck out to you, Nathan?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple different categories of statistics, and to keep this from being chaotic, maybe we could just talk about one category at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
So here are some of the statistics that I thought I did a lot of research on this.
Yeah, you have a ton of footnotes here.
Yeah. So, first, before we talk about loans, we have to talk about why people are taking out loans to begin with. It's not just people's fault and the government's fault. It's also college's fault. But it's a cyclical pattern, which often happens. So just talking about the inflation of cost of college, since 1980, the average cost of college has increased 1,200%. Which is
that's inflation, right?
It's 5.5 times inflation over that period. So inflation 236%, average cost of college 1,200%.
Yeah. Wow.
Now you ask, oh, well, why is that? Is it just because colleges are greedy and they have bloated administrative costs? Yes, but that's not the only reason. Actually, this killed me. For every dollar that the government spends to subsidize college education through loans, the price of college increases by 60 cents.
Yeah. There was a famous economist that kind of posited this. And I think the updated versions have shown 65 cents. Yeah.
So what that tells you is that one of the main things driving higher college costs is federal loans. And then people go, well, but college costs so much, so I need federal loans in order to cover it. And now we've got the cycle.
Yep. It's the loans themselves have become the reason why you need the loans to begin with. Yeah. Yep.
And of course, this is a lesson on inflation too, right? Because with all these loans, you're ending up you're inflating the cost of college. You're also inflating the cost of money too. And so here we are.
Yeah. And so one of a couple of the ones that I highlighted here were the average cost per year of in-state public college is $27,330 over 4 years. That's $109,000. If you go to school solely on student loans, $109,000 of debt. You'll never catch up with the interest unless you land a job that is like insanely liquid or lucrative. And then out of state was 176,000 over 4 years. Insane.
And this is why 50% of college graduates believe their college degree was not worth the cost. So you do cost benefit analysis on this. You have to do the economics of it. Half of college graduates don't think it was worth the cost. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me throw this out there. And I heard this quote. So you're saying, it's partly inflation's fault, but it's partly the college's, or it's partly the college's fault for being greedy. Yes. But it's also the student loans fault, right? Just the federal government's giving of money. I also want to throw another culprit in here. and it's just culture at large that for the past half a century has said that college is a necessity. You have over I don't know, we've just put so much emphasis on a college education without any other considerations. Just it's a given. You have to go to college, right? And there's this idea that unless you go to college, you're not going to realize the American dream, quote unquote. And there's an economist. He wrote a book called it's called Bubbles and Crashes. His name is Brent Goldfarb, right? And I don't know if you saw this quote, Nathan. Did you read it? Did you see this? Okay. No. He says in his book, financial bubbles usually happen when a company or product has a compelling narrative around it that isn't backed up by data. They're easy to invest in. There's a lot of uncertainty about future value, and it's often about a lot of novice investors. The compelling narrative part, we've got that down with student loans. Got it down, right? The narrative is there. And if you don't get a college education, you're not going to realize the American dream. You're not going to get a good job. That's the kind of the focus. It's also a lot of novice investors, 18-year-olds.
Yeah. 18-year-olds doing this.
18-year-olds throwing themselves on $100,000 worth of debt, like literally enslaving themselves. This is not a good thing.
No. Now I'll get to the students on debt, or the statistics on debt real quick, but this is also again how you end up undermining your own goals when you start to democratize college education. So here's the compelling narrative is, in order to get a good job, you need a college education. Well, what happens is you try to democratize that. So now everybody needs to get a college education. Well, now all of these jobs that previously wouldn't have required a college education, now they do, simply because the vast majority of people are getting the college education.
Yep.
Right. And so you're not actually helping anybody get jobs they couldn't have gotten. You're just creating a it's supply and demand. So suddenly, everybody has it and it's not worth anything anymore. So then, now we need to go to grad school, right? Now I need to get an MBA. Now I need to get, an MA in something. And of course that democratizes that.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere, so now you have the reverse effect, where a lot of businesses now are throwing up their hands, and they're like, well, now a college degree doesn't actually tell us anything about whether or not you'd be a good worker.
Exactly.
And so now we need to figure out other models. And so, but of course, what happens is, and this is another part of the narrative, is the narrative is always 10 years behind the reality in the business world. And so rising students don't get the memo until it's too late about what current businesses actually want. So there was a big bubble of computer programmers back in the early 2000s. Everyone was told, oh, you need to go into computer programming, get this college degree in computer programming. So everybody did that. And then, well, there weren't enough jobs for those people, and the market had moved on. And just, programming itself had moved on. So you have all these people, so then it was engineering after that. And so everybody got these engineering degrees. And then, well, I know people who they have a very impressive degree in nuclear engineering, and they can't get a job.
Right.
Right. And so I don't know if it's guidance counselors, I don't know if it's college admissions boards, I don't know what it is, but these students are being told things about the market that are 10 years behind the times.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many things I could say. My college experience, my professors. So I graduated bachelor's and master's in accounting and finance, right? In both those bachelor's and master's, I had the same professors, generally the same professors. And, if I would have a couple, there'd be a couple people talking to the professor and asking him why he would teach us stuff like how to write a memo, an effective memo, or how to communicate this thing really well. And his response was always, and I love this professor, he was great. His response was always that the accounting rules are always changing. They're changing so often. When you get out of here, a lot of this stuff that we're learning right now from the mechanical standpoint it may not even be applicable anymore. And so you need to get down to the root of the more fundamentals, like how do you communicate something well to your managers, right? Use the calculations, yes, get that accurate, but then how do you present that? How do you communicate it? All that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's always behind the times, like you're saying. Like, I think personally, from experience in the corporate world, that HR departments are moving. Well, there's a dark side of it. HR departments are moving more towards the equity. Like, how do we get, all this rainbow spectrum of people in the door? But also, I think HR departments are putting a lot of weight on like certifications and those sort of things. Which you can talk about whether or not that's appropriate or not. But yeah, it seems like a lot of kids are going into college thinking that the college degree is their key to the next step, when really it's, in my opinion, it's a good indication that you can commit to something and stay in it for a little while. Like, you know what I'm saying? At least from a public college standpoint. Now we can talk about the humanities and the liberal arts and what the distinction there, but yeah. So
some statistics just to back up what we've been saying: not the unemployment rate, but the underemployment rate of recent college graduates is 41%. Okay, that's so that tells you that they are, they're buying a load of goods that is not paying off. 41% underemployment rate of recent college graduates. Average student loan debt is almost $40,000. 2.6 million people owe more than $100,000 in student loan debt.
Oh my gosh.
Right? The average monthly payment on a student loan is $400 a month.
That floored me.
$400 a month. Okay, so that's half of my mortgage. Right.
That's insane.
So what that's doing is that student loan debt has caused a large majority of college students to postpone marriage, postpone family, postpone buying a home. Yep. All of those things that are, one, good for them as individuals, but also are the stabilizing influences for the larger society.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Land owning, having a family. People want that. Most people want to get married and have kids. Most people want to own a home, but they can't if they're paying $400 a month or $600 a month or $800 a month in student loan debt, and that's going to go on for years and years and years.
Yeah. I heard someone bring up the discussion about basically older people not being able to make use of their Social Security money because they're still paying off student loans. And that's like the student loan debt affecting the Social Security bubble. like the bubbles are crashing into each other. Like, it's a not a good situation.
And you think about this. So, everybody should, if they can, have a Roth IRA, right? You put that $6,000 a year in that Roth. That's your little extra retirement, because maybe you don't have a job that gives you retirement or 401k, or you need a little bit extra, whatever. So that's the $400 a month that you would be putting toward your Roth, we'll say, you're now having to be put toward student loans.
Yeah.
So, and actually there's a statistic, 84% of American adults report that student loans negatively affect their ability to save for retirement. Okay.
Yeah.
So they can't. And of course, you only have a limited amount of money. So you got to pay rent, you got to pay food, and you got to pay for your car, and you've also got to pay for your student loans. You can't afford to save for retirement.
Yeah.
So it's now you're going to have what you're going to have, like you're just saying, is you're going to have a bunch of people who are in their 60s and 70s and wanting to retire. And well, the government's definitely not going to come through for them, giving them enough to live on. And then they look at their retirement income. And of course, as we know, time value of money is that what you're able to put away in your 20s and 30s is what's going to be able to grow into a large enough sum for you to live on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in your 20s and 30s when you're paying off all your student loan debt.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if you start packing it in your 40s and 50s, time value of money, it's too late. And
yeah.
People don't think about this.
It's sad to think about. It's suffocating for a lot of people. It's like completely suffocating. Like you're locked. What do you do? I was doing some research. I was looking at how to start saving for Gentry and Campbell with a 520. I was going to open a 529 plan, and I did some research. You have to get some rough stats on the growth of college, tuition and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the statistics show that college tuition for the past little while has gradually increased. Like it's pretty consistently increasing. But then you look at the total aggregate student loan debt chart, and it's like starting in in the past 10, 15, 20 years, just skyrocket. Right. But how does that match up? Because, it's the average tuition is gradually increasing, not super significant. Aggregate, the whole thing is skyrocketing. Well, what's going on there? The federal government, especially in 2010, what was it? 2010 was the, what was it? I have the notes here. Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act. Private institutions taken out of the student loan market, and student loan debt skyrocketed. So basically in 2010, student loans, the government's providing student loans. Well, that incentivizes a whole bunch more people to get student loans, right? So you've got a whole bunch more people in the market, even though the average tuition per year is only increasing gradually, but the aggregate amount is skyrocketing. And it tells you about economics. Economics is so important. Incentives are so important. The government incentivizes, when it incentivizes free money, it, skyrockets demand. Supply can't catch up. So prices have to skyrocket, right? The government provides those loans, right? Provides the free money. And then the colleges, since everyone can go to college, the colleges have to spend more on crazy amenities to attract people, the talent, or the actual good students. And so they get, these crazy amenities. I had that link in here, and there was one. Did you see that, Nathan? I don't know if you got a chance to look at it. Some of these colleges have, for instance, this one, Michigan Technology Institute, has its own ski resort. South Dakota State has a personal dairy bar, which I think South Dakota has something to do with agriculture. Maybe you could do that. Yeah. The University of Missouri has a lazy river and a beach club. And they have a picture in here. This thing it's luxurious. I'll just say that.
Wow.
Here's one that hits kind of close to home. High Point University has a steakhouse, a luxury steakhouse. Yeah. And it's just,
well, yeah, of course, because they're getting gobs and gobs of federally subsidized money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do we do with this? Well, you kind of they've done the polls of incoming students about what is it that makes you choose one college over another. And it's these sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly.
It's food, it's living situation, it's free activities.
Yep.
And so
that's it. But that's the narrative, right? The narrative, you need to go to college. Yeah. Yes. To get a good education so you can get a good job, but also I've heard it plenty of times. You need the college experience, right? You need to get the college experience. What the heck is the college experience? What do you mean? I guess it means lazy river with your friends, ski beach day. Pomona College has luxury apartments for all of its students.
So yeah, basically what it is you can go into an extreme amount of debt that you don't have to pay off for 4 years. So you get 4 years of being able to experience what it's like to be a millionaire.
Exactly.
And so everyone needs to,
but it's only those 4 years.
That's right. And then of course you will strap yourself with so much debt, it'll be impossible for you to ever actually become a millionaire. But for those 4 years, man.
4 years of living like a millionaire and then the rest living like a hobo.
Exactly. Yes. So that's the extreme, right? So, you could have just become, solidly middle class for your whole life, but instead you get 4 years as a millionaire and then the rest of your life as a hobo. Wouldn't you want that?
Oh man. And so it's the cycle, right? That, like you're saying, that's the cycle. It's the student loans create this incentive for people to go to college. More people, more demand, higher demand. You have to somehow raise the supply. So then colleges have to spend a whole bunch of money on all these different things to attract people, right? They've got to compete. They've got to do something to try to attract those students. So they buy all these different things, which makes them need more student loans. Mm-hmm. So, it's crazy. So, and aside from the amenities, I also had this other idea of what's causing the inflation in colleges, which was administrative. And you brought this up in one of your statistics, administrative costs. And you can talk about that if you want. But this study reported by the Federalist, I just wanted to read this. We discovered that, and it's about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion departments. We discovered that overall, the number of DEI dedicated staff is dramatically out of proportion to other programs serving higher education goals. For example, the typical university devotes 4.2 times as many staff to promoting DEI initiatives than they do to helping disabled students get reasonable accommodations. And the latter is required by law. On average, DEI staff outnumbered history professors by 40%. Overall, there are 3.4 people working to promote DEI for every 100 tenured or tenure-track faculty members. And then it goes on to say some universities have strikingly large numbers of people with DEI responsibilities in their job titles. At the University of Michigan, for example, 163 people have formal responsibility for providing DEI programming and services. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, hitting close to home, has more than 13 times as many people devoted to promoting DEI as providing services to people with disabilities. And then Georgia Tech has 3.2 times as many DEI staff as it does history professors. The University of Virginia boasts 6.5 DE staff for every 100 professors. And then they go on to talk about how they are super conservative in their population, who they counted as DEI staff. Like you could have departments that are teaching DEI and all that kind of stuff, but unless their position was created specifically for that purpose, they're not gonna count it. So yeah, another thing, it's like, where are the priorities in colleges and their budgets is right. Another thing.
Yeah. So so talking about admin in general, 73%, so almost 3/4 of the budget of public colleges and universities go toward non-instructional spending.
What is that? What do you count as non-instructional?
So that would be sports teams, and that would be anything that's not going directly into to the classroom. So, obviously instructional spending would be books, facilities where classes are taught, professors, obviously, professors, library, anything to do with the actual education would be instructional spending. Mm-hmm. So imagine this: you have a company, and the company's stated goal is to sell X product, but 3/4 of that company's spending actually does not relate at all to the product that it's actually selling. Do you think your board of directors would support that or keep you on as the CEO?
No.
That in the business world, that's what's called waste, right? That's
Right,
what's called
right,
waste.
right.
But what's happening with these colleges and universities is they're actually just lying. So they say that they're there to educate. They say that education is the product that they're selling.
Yep.
But if 3/4 of their budget has nothing to do with that product, then that's actually not the product that they're selling. The product that they're selling is the experience, these
Yep.
small metropolises of,
Right.
you know,
It's the compelling
Epicurean living. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. It's like we're not in the realm of student loans are helping people get education that they can then use to get good jobs and be good citizens. That is not the world that we're living in. It's student loans are helping colleges now become something that they something totally different than they used to be.
Yeah. And
Student
in of
loans,
themselves.
in and of themselves, it's actually changed the very nature of college.
Yeah.
Because I'm an administrator, I'm an assistant dean as well as a professor at New College. I know how lean a budget can be if your budget is mainly focused on instructional spending.
Yeah.
We've at New College, we flipped that number. So 3/4 of our budget is toward instructional spending. And we've made the admin really lean. And it actually ends up meaning that we can focus on the main thing, which is education. But it also is really good for the students because the students who come are they actually have to learn how to be adults. So we don't provide dormitories, so they live on their own and they have to learn how to pay rent and pay utilities and make a budget. We don't provide a meal plan, which means they have to learn how to cook and shop and do things that everyone does who isn't living in college.
Right.
Because they don't get student loans, they have to get part-time jobs. But we keep our tuition really low. And so they can actually afford to pay for college with part-time jobs. So now what happens is, one, we actually do what we're purported to do, which is teach, educate students. So they come away with a really excellent education. They also come away with the skills needed to actually live in the world because they've been working and they've been living and they've been doing the normal human things.
They've not been at daycare for 4 years.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So what I guess this kind of actually let me revisit that Bible verse I read at the very beginning, Lamentations 2:14, when God is telling Israel, just basically explaining to them why they're in the situation they're in, and why things have gone badly for them. Your prophets have seen for you false and deceptive visions. They have not exposed your iniquity to restore your fortunes, but have seen for you oracles that are false or misleading. Now, I'm the guy who's very hesitant about allegorizing or abstracting Bible verses to like make it fit a specific message. Like Jerry Boyer talks about, taking your best thinking and finding a Bible verse to hang it on. You don't want to do that. But just something struck me about that was like, we have these, allegorized or, abstracted prophets in society that are telling us, casting this vision for us, telling us, how things are going to be and all that stuff, and then giving us a track to go down. But they haven't really pushed back against us. They haven't really like told us the reality of the situation. They haven't told us the reality of like the struggle. Right. And they've cast for us false and misleading visions. So I thought that was super, super pertinent. But so I guess this brings up the next question, Nathan. So what do we do? I mean, what's the next step? What do we do as a society? How do we start thinking about this? Like, is there a good next step? What do you think?
So, well, one thing, and this is actually probably going to be super depressing, but actions have consequences. And I do not think there is any solution at this point that can suddenly take away the negative consequences of what has happened.
Let me ask you this. The student loan debt forgiveness, whether it's the 10,000 or whatever it is, yes or no?
Well, I'll tell you my thought process.
Okay.
I'm really actually torn on this.
I am too.
Because the government holds a major responsibility for this student loan debt problem. It's not just on the students. And we can talk about that. A lot of these students were foolish and they weren't thinking straight, and a lot of them might be entitled, and they might have really bad arguments for why they should get their student loan debt forgiven and all those sorts of things. But that's a lot of what kind of conservatives will talk about. And I think they're right about that. You don't just want to willy-nilly forgive unwise decisions from all these young people. Absolutely.
Yeah, but creates a moral hazard kind of thing.
Yeah. But the government does bear a major responsibility on this because it is exploitation. It is a justice issue. I see this as not quite the same thing as those like quick cash loan places, like checking to cash sort of thing, but it's close. I mean, this is something that if the government bears a major responsibility on this, then they might bear some of the responsibility for alleviating the distress of these people.
Yeah. But I was going to say the underlying economic like phenomenon is it's you can see it in all the other places too. Housing. When governments, subsidize housing, it has to get more expensive. Okay, let me just throw this out there. This is just kind of the rule of thumb. If the government's involved, the natural pressure of the pricing mechanism is upward. Introduce the government, that natural pressure is automatically, it switches from downward. When you have competition, right, the natural kind of entropy, I guess is what you call it, is downward. When you have competition, the natural pressure on prices is downward. When the government's involved, the orientation switches, right? The natural pressure is upward, and it can't not go upward when there's free money being kind of thrown in there. So and take that thinking and apply it to whatever you want: housing, healthcare, education, right? The famous saying is, if you think college or healthcare is expensive now, wait until it's free. It's true. It's true. It has to get more expensive. So like you're saying, Nathan, I'm torn on this as well. Part of me is like, okay, the government has a huge responsibility for this, right? An overbearing responsibility for this because of what the system is set up and how it kind of sucks people in, and you've got that cycle going on. The other part of me is like, even if the students are unaware or uninformed, don't have the right information, or are operating on false pretenses, you don't want to subsidize or reward not having enough information, right? So there's the moral hazard thing. Like you don't want to subsidize people's bad information or not having the right information.
I think it's clear that the government needs to get out of this business. So it's like
if we're gonna have forgiveness, cut off the hose.
Cut off the hose, because otherwise you're just going to be perpetuating the same problem for more and more. So my argument would be that first step is to separate the question of remediation. So what do we do about the problem we currently have? And then that from what is the government going to do in the future? And I think it's clear that in the future, the government needs to get out of this federal loan business. Then you can tackle the question of how do you do remediation? And my thought is this. So we're talking about justice in a sense, not justice in a sense of equity, but justice in a sense of people have been taken advantage of. There's fault on both sides. Something needs to be done. If I say owe somebody some money because I took advantage of them, and then my argument is, well, yeah, but if I give you that money, then like I'm not going to be able to provide for my family. well, somebody needs to come in and take a close look at my budget and go, is that true? Or are you actually spending a lot of money you don't need to spend elsewhere? And is it actually possible that you could remediate that other person's need and also be able to provide the same amount for your family if we cut out some of this other stuff?
Yeah.
And I think that's the larger thing, is that I think the federal government needs to have a more of a zero-sum game view of money, which of course they don't have. So maybe this is just pie in the sky thinking. But you say, if we did the $10,000 forgiveness, that would be $3,000 per taxpayer, right?
Yeah.
So
If that's the way how they're going to fund it, which ultimately I think it would have to in some way come back to the taxpayer. But
right, because it goes either way, right? If it's not directly out of the taxpayers' wallets, then you have inflation, which is the same. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what the government would need to do then is go, okay, so that $3,000 per taxpayer is now what we need to trim out of our budget. And well, yeah, there's plenty of ways that the government could trim $3,000 per taxpayer out of their budget, so that it's not the taxpayer who actually feels the hit of $3,000. It's the government's budget feels the hit.
$1.6 trillion. You think the government's going to?
Well, no, that would be if the government forgave all student loan debt. If the government did the 10,000 per, it wouldn't be 1.6 trillion.
Yeah.
Yeah. That to forgive all, it would just at this point be impossible.
Yeah. But the problem though is like, there's no, so I'm a big proponent of this, and you know this from our discussions throughout the past couple of years. The idea of not having, the government doesn't have skin in the game, doesn't have the risk, right? The decisions or the consequences of the decisions they make are not close to home. They're out there, right? And so like I was saying, the natural pressure is always more. Like I talked about this scenario a while back, but the military, they get a budget, they get a whole bunch of supplies, they use it. If they haven't used all the supplies at the end of the year, they go out and have a free day of just using it all up, so that and maybe even more, so that the next year the budget, grows, right? That's the incentive. That's the draw. That's the incentive of the whole system. And so this is why I think that one of the biggest things is going to be federal government has to get out of education. Private institutions have to be willing to come in and start providing privatized loans, because there's the incentive there. There's the pressure to accurately assess the trade-offs, the risk and return, the risk and reward, that sort of thing. The pressure is going to be there, so that the price is at the market price, and not at this some inflated price that's just way out in outer space. So you have to have that. It has to, your decisions have to be close to home. And I kind of want to bring this to a kind of a biblical principles kind of talk. Anytime you talk about this discussion, the student loan debt, and someone comes up and they say, that's not fair. It's not fair to this person. It's not fair to, people who didn't go to college and didn't get their degrees and that sort of thing. Though I think that's legitimate, I think that's way secondary, right? I think that the unfairness should be a secondary consideration. Lots of things are unfair, right? Lots of things just are just not fair in life. That's fine. What we should be thinking as Christians is, I want to help bear someone's burdens. I want to be able to provide a service to someone, to alleviate them of their burdens. That should be our natural kind of position, and our draw is to help people when they're down. Now, on the flip side, we also want to be people who know that what we're doing in student loan debt forgiveness is foisting our burdens onto someone else, right? Mm-hmm. So you got these two different things. I want to help this person, but I also want to not push my burdens onto someone else, which I know is what is going to happen in the economic arena. And so when someone says, hey, that's not fair, well, it's like, okay, yes, I'll help you. I understand this world's fallen, that sort of thing. I want to do what I can to help you. Also, while also saying I'm not going to subsidize student loans with someone else's money. Right. When Jesus went to the cross, he went on his own volition for the joy that was set before him. He's the one that laid down his life. We do not take it from him, right? Yeah. He's the one. The locus of control was on himself. I love these people. I'm going to lay down my life for them. I'm going to do this. And I think that should be our thing as well. I want to help you. I want to do this. I want to provide for you. I want to help alleviate your burdens. I don't want to push my burdens onto you. Right. Yeah. So there's just my biblical.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that holds the tension for both. You always have to think about what is the impact on my neighbor for this policy or for this thing that I support. And I think what we need to do is, we need to be thinking about, we need to really check our selfishness at the door, right? Mm-hmm. And we also need to be aware that we all have selfish tendencies, right? So I didn't take out student loans. I had to work through college. So I don't want that person over there who's suffering under crippling student loan debt to get their debt forgiven.
That's what that's what I'm saying. Like, that's
not Christian. You got to check yourself, right? I want them to suffer because I had to suffer.
Yeah.
Wait, that's the opposite, right? It should be do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right?
Yeah.
Now, that is not an argument. That's not an economic argument for the economic viability of forgiving student loan debt. Correct. Right? Like, I think we all recognize that just willy-nilly forgiving student loan debt is not a good economic policy. But from the moral perspective, I think you're right. We have to be aware that can be one tendency. And then we also have to be aware on the other side that we are all drawn to the lure of free money. I mean, all of us are, right? I remember I was torn about the whole the checks that the government was sending during the pandemic, the relief checks. And I was going back and forth because the government was was one of the main reasons why a lot of people couldn't work, because they kind of forced things to be shut down, and you can argue about that. But what I remember was I knew that this would increase inflation. And I didn't like that. And so personally, I was against those checks, at least those checks going out willy-nilly to everybody. I thought it needed to be more targeted.
Yeah.
But then I started getting money from the government in the mail. I was like, this is nice, right?
I know. Yeah.
And then the third payment didn't actually come. No surprise, the IRS messed up. And I remember getting upset, like I deserved that money. And
like you had already priced it in. Like,
yeah, that's right. Come on, I deserve that $1,500 or whatever. And I had to remind myself, you know what? Just a couple months ago, you were against anybody getting that check.
Right.
But I want that, right? I want that money.
Right.
And so I had to kind of remind myself, okay, that's the human urge, right? Mm-hmm. That's the human urge. And
it's the same thing with me. Like, part of me deep down is real, drawn to the idea, because I do have a little bit of student loan debt. If they do forgive 10,000, and I think I would qualify, I don't know, it would essentially wipe mine out. So there's like that, oh man, like, can you imagine? So yeah, but this is the thing. It's like, we're called to control ourselves, to manage ourselves, self-government. And that requires consideration of what is happening to your neighbor, right? Even if the consequence is way out there in the distance, like, you still have to consider that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we'll close out here, but I want to, Nathan, give you a chance to pitch New College. Why New College? Why? I mean, are people going to get into student loan debt at New College?
No, they will not. So I could give you lots of different reasons why New College from an ethos perspective or a moral perspective or a theological perspective, but we'll do it from the economic perspective since this is what we've been talking about.
Okay.
I actually talked to a student on the phone yesterday, or a prospective student, and was telling him this. I asked him, do you know what specific vocation you want to go into and what specifically you will need to be trained in order to go into that vocation? And he, like most people, wasn't sure. And so I said, okay, here's the thing. If you go get a major thinking, not really knowing what profession you want to go into and not really knowing even what would be required to get into that profession, but you go to a school, you get a major, you go into student loan debt, or even if you don't go into debt, you still pay tens of thousands of dollars. Cost benefit analysis, that is a huge risk you're taking, because if you are like the majority of people, then you will graduate with a degree, and then you will go into a field that actually is not related to that degree, or did not require that degree, or didn't require the skills that you learned getting that degree. So now you've just spent a bunch of money for something that is practically worthless, right? Do you want to gamble future money on that if you don't actually know what profession you want to go into and you don't actually know what's going to be required in order to be trained for that profession? So if you're one of like most 18-year-olds coming out of high school, then you might want to actually do a safer bet, which is get an education that no matter what job you get will actually be very helpful for that job, and also be very helpful for the way that you live your life for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Get a job that's going to train you how to think, how to be self-motivated, how to learn on your own, how to be a critical thinker, how to communicate, how to have all those soft skills that, big secret, this is what employers want anyway.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Right. Also, a moral education that trains you in the kind of character that makes you the kind of worker that every employer would actually want. You're honest, you're hardworking, you get along with other people, you're not a jerk, you're not entitled, all those sorts of things. And it's going to be something that forms you and shapes you into a more full-bodied person who will enrich every part of your life and not just your professional life. So you can guarantee, if you come to New College, that what you put in, you will get something really good out of. And so that is a far greater guarantee than rolling the dice, going to a college, not knowing what you're going to do. Now, of course, the flip side of that is some people coming out of high school know exactly what they want to do, right? I want to go into the medical field. So I need to get a pre-med degree, and then I need to go to med school so I can become a doctor. Okay, great. Don't come to New College, right? You know exactly what you need to do. I know I need to be an engineer. So I need to go get an engineering degree that's going to teach me all that higher math that I need. Well, New College isn't going to teach you all the engineering math that you're going to need. So go somewhere else, right? There are plenty of students who shouldn't come to New College because they know precisely what they want to do and how to get there.
Yeah. But even then, like we were talking about earlier, a lot of these college programs are, they're going to teach you the mechanics, the calculations and all that, but the employer is going to rely mainly on the certification that you get outside of school anyway.
Right.
So why not?
Yeah.
And those certifications have their own, like, you can do your own training. Like for my CIA, I had to pass 3 exams in a year. Right. And they give you, there's different programs that'll coach you through and kind of give you study programs and all that kind of stuff to do on your own.
Right.
You could do something like that while going to school and getting these, like, the more longer lasting,
right,
universal, skills that you're going to need.
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have had a lot of, or quite a few students who that has been what they've done. I mean, they're entrepreneurs, they're businessmen, they're in tech. and they've actually done really well. And they've gotten some of those certifications on their own. They've taught themselves certain things, and they've just kind of soared. Right?
Yeah. I've always wanted to do a talk about the history of the university. It's such an interesting history, like the medieval ages, even prior to that, like guilds and all that kind of stuff. And just kind of the purpose of education in general. Like what's the whole idea, that everyone always brings up. University means like one verse, right? It's God. It's all about God. And I do think you can't divorce education from worldview or morality, right? And so like New College, you're pitching it as like, yeah, you're going to get the moral component there as well. Whereas at a public institution, they're going to pretend like they're neutral in their worldview and in their thinking when they approach these topics. But yeah, so, and you won't have the debt when you come out. Right. You won't be shackled when you're done.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Anything else, Nathan?
Well, I could just close by saying, saying all that I just did, at New College, our goal is, even if you don't get that dream job, or even if you're not going to make as much money as you would have going to a secular university or something like that, even if that was the case, our main goal is that you come out loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself, and becoming conformed to the image of Christ and knowing God. And that, obviously, as Christians, we know is priceless. And so even if the economics was not in your favor at all, it's still worthwhile because it's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yep. And I think we're in a renaissance, or maybe not a renaissance, but I think our society is really reconsidering the fact that or how intertwined education is with worldview and morality. I think that's, as you saw with the statistics about like homeschooling and all that, like, yeah, crazy times. All right. I think that's it. Go like and subscribe to the podcast. Click the notification bell on YouTube. Go to Good Fight Outfitters. I think we have some discounts running right now, so go check it out. And we'll see you guys next time. Love God, love neighbor, build something. Talk to you later. Cool. When are you and Hannah coming in?
We're still recording, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I'm not recording on the audio.
This has been a Manifold Ministries podcast. For more content, visit us at manifoldministries.com.